Hi everyone! I'm glad to see you here at TSConf 2021. I'm Ali Ragimov, and today I would like to share with you my experience in tuning TSConfig, because we all know it might be tricky sometimes. So let's get started. Why configuring is so complicated sometimes? So there are a few reasons. First of all, there are too many options. Some options are implicit. That means they have default values, but we might don't even know about them. Some options can redeclare default values of the other options. And some options can even override values already defined. I've read official reference dozens of times. And I have been finding new little details about configuring while using TypeScript. I try to organize my discoveries somehow. I wrote a few Twitter threads and a couple of articles about the topic. And today I was going to share with you the gist of my work. But a couple of weeks before the workshop, I realized something. Actually, I didn't discover anything new. Most probably, I just rediscover the stuff which was already described in other articles by other people. And every person reveals such stuff again and again, if it even was done before. I believe it's happening because text format isn't convenient if you need to get specific bits of information when you need it most. I started to think about a better way to organize that knowledge. And I recalled a feature request at GitHub to make showConfig more verbose. ShowConfig option is the parameter for TypeScript compiler which can compose full list of files will be included to a build, but it doesn't explain other features. Request also says it would be nice to have an ability to get full TSConfig with all default values, like on the picture on the right. Other words, we pass our short config and it gives us the full version of it. And then I've come up with an idea to prototype similar thing. And I've created a repo. Let me show it to you. Here we are. It's called TSConfig helper. It's available to install through package managers like npm. And here is the list of options. For instance, we can get debug info for each option using --explain parameter and then save the result to a file using --out option. Now, let me show you how it works. Here is the Visual Studio Code, and just for start, let's create tsconfig example.json. It will be just an empty config. I already have on TypeScript config helper installed, and its CLI version is called TSCH, which means, of course, TypeScript config helper. And now we can try to run it. Let's specify what file we would like to convert to full version and run. Here we can see previously it was an empty config, now it contains a number of options. Okay, but it's still unclear why did that happen. That's why we can use dash explain option to see additional comments. Yeah, as we can see, the target option is yes free because it's just static default value, but module now is common.js because module depends on target. For instance, if target is ES3 or ES5, then module is common.js, and so on. But it might be not really convenient to read it here. That's why let's use another option, dash out, to save the result to a file. Let it be TSConfig result.json. Okay, here we are. Now we can see our result saved to a file, and now it's more convenient to read. For instance, here really huge description about the lib option, which depends on target. For instance, if target is equal to ES6, then it will include this list of definitions. In other cases, it would be contain other set of type definitions. Also, let's pay attention for include option. Now it contains glob pattern, which means every TS file in project directory tree will be included. As we can see, by default, include option depends on files. If files is defined, then it's an empty array. But now we are here at this branch of condition, this glob pattern. Okay, let's try to define files manually. Go to our original config, files, src, index ts, for instance. Let's imagine it exists. Save. Go to CLI and rerun previous command. Now we can see files are defined, and it even doesn't contain any comment above it, because comments exist only for options who was added by our CLI tool. User-defined values usually are not commented. And now we also can see include option is an empty array. right now. Everything we expected. Now let's pay attention for exclude option. By default, it contains root directory of package managers like node modules, bar components, JSPM packages. And this is here. Also, include contains additional conditions. For instance, the value also depends of out dir and declaration dir. If they are defined, the previous default value will be merged with values of out dir and declaration dir. Let's check how it works. Back to our TSConfig original. And add out dir option, for instance dist, then declaration dir, for instance dist/types, and let's also enable this declaration emit. Save and rerun previous comment again. Let's have a look at the result. Now, as expected, we can see dist and these types also was added to our array to exclude option. Okay, let's pay attention for these two flags. Check.js is false now and allow.js is false now. By default, check.js is always false, but allow.js can be enabled by check.js. And sometimes we would like to see all options by default, but sometimes we wouldn't like to see options which don't produce any effect. For instance, allow.js and check.js are false and it doesn't have any impact to our config. As and include option, which is an empty array right now, and it also doesn't produce any effect. So sometimes it might be more convenient to not see extra values such as falsy values. Let's try another one option for our CLI tool -- ignore. Let's go to result. Now we can see allow.js, check.js and include just disappeared. It's because they had falsy values, false and empty array. Also, sometimes it's enough to see just relation between options, but do not read all the long explanation like in lib option. Yeah, sometimes it's too verbose. And we can use option for our CLI tool -- short. Run command again, and now instead of long comments we have short comments like Module just depends on target without any extra explanation. If we need this, we can use it. If we don't need this, we can just omit some details. But the tool supports not only comments for default values, it also supports declaration cautions. For instance, let's define in our original config some options which are deprecated. One of them is out. Let it be just these two. Yeah. And another one is charset UTF-8. Save and let's run the tool again. Now we can see out there have a comment deprecated in favor to out there because we have to use out there instead. And charted is just deprecated, there is no replacement for it. Now always all files should be UTF-8 by default. I just showed you all those examples, but how does it actually work? Let me show you how it works under the hood. Here is the source code of the tool, TSConfig helper, and the main idea here is to create declarative data structure to describe all options and relations between them. For instance, every option has a name, and also every option could has a mark. Either should the option be placed in root section of config or in compiler options section. For instance, files include exclude in the root, but target module and others in compiler section. Also, every option can contain default descriptor. It's just data structure to explain how exactly this option related to some other option. And there are a couple of ways to describe these relations. For instance, target have just static value. It's always yes free. But sometimes, for instance, exclude option depends on files. And if files are defined, include is an empty array. If files not defined, include will be this glob pattern which we saw before. Sometimes, like in case with lib, we have more complicated conditions. There is a pairs of values. For instance, if target is ex6, then lib will be include this list of values. And so on. For each target, there is a list of values. And also, otherwise, if our target is none of the above values, otherwise there is default value. And there is even more complicated case in exclude. Because exclude contains an array of default descriptors. First of them is just static value. It's always exclude package manager directories, but also it contains additional conditions related to out dir and declaration dir, as we saw before. These data structures are used to create both and the result config default values and these comments above each option. So, I believe this tool can be really useful to understand and tune TSConfigs. Now the project is a prototype, and it has described only about 10% of all options. So, my next step is to do full coverage of all options, support more difficult relations between them, and provide more useful hints. And the last one. If you are interested in the topic, here are all necessary links. Please also try the utility out or maybe even contribute to it. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching and see you.